Well, in episode 604 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network, I'm Dean Hilton, and the preseason in the United States is over. All three matches are in the books, and I want to talk a little bit here, as I am still actually recording on the watch along in the post game of the AC Milan game after the penalties. So with all of the preseason just having finished, I'm still kind of digesting it all, and there are some thoughts that I want to take away. Not really probably going to be 5 headlines this year, but this is going to be a little bit of a new format where I do a longer post game that winds up being almost an immediate podcast. We'll see how this all works out. So there are some ideas from the 3 preseason games that I want to dive into. So let's get into it. First, the big thing before I basically go player by player through the preseason, the thing I really want to talk about more than anything else is that the system that Hansi Flick, the 4-2-3-1 that he put forth, that we knew that he was going to bring to Barcelona. We saw with the German national team. We saw with Bayern Munich to mixed results, but generally to positive results. He was going to bring that to Barcelona. And I think the adaptation time that is taken for this group of players, again, it's not everybody with the European players who are at the Euro, I should say, coming back and even Koundé and Rafinha and Lewandowski revving up their engines into the preseason. While not everybody's around, you're also missing your midfield. Gundogan had a little bit of time here against AC Milan, but without De Jong, no Pedri, no Gavi, it's still going to be a little bit to see what this really looks like, and especially when the other teams are also at their peak and throughout the middle of the season and in the dog days of the winter time in Spain, I guess you want to say that. Then when the heat really picks up, and not the physical heat, but the actual intensity picks up come the spring season when it's time to hopefully win some trophies at that time. So this system will be pushed a little bit farther as well throughout the season. But as far as what we've seen in the preseason, I like how at least this group of players that Hansi Flick took to the US took to his system really well. And the reason I know that they took to this system, a few little notes here. Just against AC Milan, I counted, I want to call it 5.5, maybe as many as 7 successful balls that were played either from one of the wingers moving into the middle of the field and dropping in and then playing on either the 9 or a midfielder or the other winger, or it was more likely Lewandowski, especially in this game, and then Rafinha when he was playing as the 10, were one-touch balls into the half space that either Pau Victor or Rafinha himself were running onto. And that is how so many of these movements are going to work out, because even if you turn the ball over in that position, maybe it goes back to the goalkeeper or whatever it does, your wingers are your wingers and your fullbacks have not completely committed to that width. So you still have a pretty good shape defensively to set yourself up for success. So you're putting a lot on that one touch or an individual moment of brilliance, but it's not, because these players are good enough to be able to handle those responsibilities. So a number of times this preseason where these goals, I think both goals against AC Milan were set up in a similar fashion. Really good stuff there from the players that we will expect to see. I mean, Pau Victor will, as with my YouTube video I just came out with earlier today, as I'm recording this, Pau Victor will likely be in the first team. The other thing that I'm really impressed, the big picture idea, not only is how quickly the team seemed to adapt to the tactics of Hansi Flick, but it's that the young players seem to understand the system rather well. And I know it seems very dogmatic to the formations that Barcelona play a 4-3-3 or whatever it is. But one of the prevailing notions that I hope you've learned over 7 years of this podcast is that the Barca way, if you want to call it that, is more about a style than it is about a dogmatic formation, right? Don't get hampered by the idea of a 4-3-3. They played a 4-3-3 the way they did throughout the Messi and Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets glory years, because Xavi and Iniesta, can you ask for 2 better interiors and pivot? I mean, as far as the pivot, can you ask for a better one in Busquets? That is really why Barcelona played in that formation that they did. Right before that, under Rijkaard with Ronaldinho, was that really a 4-3-3? Kind of, but at times it was a 3-4-3 as well. At times it was a 4-4-2. Ernesto Valverde, that was a 4-4-2, and I know he got a lot of flack for that, but don't get just caught with the formation so much, because attacking, this is a 4-2-3-1, but defending, it's a 4-4-2. We're going to see 4-3-3 in transition. So it's all about the phases of play. So numbers don't matter as much. I know that I talk about them, and it helps us understand and see players and positions and the field a lot better. That's why we talk about formations, but it doesn't really tell the whole picture of the way that Hansi Flick wants to play. What he said he wants to do is press. And young players seem to understand how to press. Young players tend to leave spaces in behind, and they might not understand exactly what the permutations are, or their timing with especially first team teammates they never combined with. It seemed like those things can be off. But maybe it's because Bernal and Casado were together with Barca Athletic last season. But there's been something very clean about that press, especially in a midfield that, as we said, at the pivot positions, maybe Andres Christensen in this AC Milan game was the answer there to start the season. I think he will be. That Casado and AC Milan and Christensen against AC Milan, that's going to be that starting double pivot against Valencia now in 11 days. So that's possible. But I do think that moving forward, having your depth at least, which is many of the players we saw in the preseason, understand the system, it means you can swap out players. And it does make me a little less worried about injuries than I may have been in many years. Because remember, before the last few years where one injury or two injuries because of squad depth destroyed your chances, now we're going back to Messi and one or two injuries unbalance your total squad because you were missing other spots, you had holes, you had to rely on Messi a little bit too much. And my whole goal for Barcelona this year, not the whole goal, but one of the main goals for Barcelona this year should be to not rely on Lamine Yamal to save them in every match like they did in the spring, unfortunately. So those are some big ideas. La Bolsa, which if you've been with me again since the Frances period, I think the last time we did this, we probably did this in one of his return podcasts in the last few years, but really the last time we consistently did this was 2019, maybe 2020, somewhere around the pandemic. La Bolsa, that just means stock up, stock down in Spanish. So we're going to go through the preseason and at least the players that we saw, and I'm going to do a little bit of stock up, stock down. Now, because you get to see my hands if you're watching, but if you're only listening, I'll just tell you how high or low I'm going to go here. So for Ter Stegen, let's start with him. I mean, stock is completely even. He was a starting goalkeeper for Barcelona before the preseason. He's a starting goalkeeper for Barcelona after the preseason. I can't remember a single moment with Ter Stegen that I'm too worried about. Alex Valle, stock up. I think he showed you against Real Madrid with the cross to Pau Victor. He showed you even in the first game playing, well, he played actually all three games, I should say, out of position. He's a left back. He played all three games as a right back. And if he's capable, just like Hector Fort, when he came up to the first team last year, playing as a left back, when he's a right back, being a fullback who plays out of position on the opposite wing, that means you're versatile and that means you can be useful. So Alex Valle, I think stock is up because his crossing has been good. His defending has been good enough because, again, I think the back line of Gerard Martin, Lenglet, Dominguez, and Alex Valle against the front four of AC Milan in Jovic, Pulisic, Chikwueze, and Rafael Leao, who I think of that four, those are generally regular starters for AC Milan, maybe swapping one or two out. So when you're facing AC Milan's regular starting unit, I don't think the back four that I mentioned are really probably ever going to play together again. So I'm not too worried about the defensive mistakes against AC Milan in the preseason match with that back four. So Alex Valle, stock up. Sergio Dominguez, of course, stock is up. He was a rotation piece for Barca Athletic last season, and maybe he's arguably now going to be the starter because we don't know what's going to happen with Mika Faye and Mamadou Fall. I think it's going to be the other starting center back for Barca Athletic. So Sergio Dominguez, it's your job, depending on what happens with Mika Faye. Lenglet, stock is way across. I mean, he's supposed to be a professional. He's supposed to be sold. His wages are really high. So I don't think he did anything to lower his stock for the club to sell him, but it's not like he did an amazing preseason where I think other teams are calling Barcelona's phone lines off the hook. If that's how, phones used to work that way for the younger people here. So yeah, I mean, if that's the case that he did well enough that they could sell him, great, but stock even. Gerard Martin, I think stock up. He was an afterthought for me for Barca Athletic. I didn't really focus on him too much. I thought he had a good preseason. I think he was useful, but I also think that if the first team depth has gotten down to Gerard Martin, I think a lot of the other fullbacks I'm about to name on this preseason tour should be, including Alejandro Balde, on the depth chart above him. Now, if he's above Mika Faye, I think it tells you a little bit more about Faye's future this season at the club than it does about Gerard Martin, who I think is still going to be the regular starter with Barca Athletic week in and week out. Marc Casado, stock way up. One of the four players that I say, not to the moon, but stock is way up. I didn't know how valuable he'd be with the first team. I thought maybe very much like Nico Gonzalez in his first season with the first team that he'd just kind of get a spot, get a jersey, see what you can do, kid. But Casado looks like he's going to be a rotation piece as a defensive midfielder. And who knows how long it'll take Gavi to get back. Pedri and De Jong, I mean, we have no idea. So Marc Casado could very, very possibly start 5 of the first 5 matches or 4 of the first 5 matches as one of those double pivots. So his stock is way up to me in this preseason. Andres Christensen, stock, I'd say also medium. Probably going to go 90 in the preseason at all. But his stamina, really my only issue. I think there were some mistakes that were made along the back line, but once Kunde came in, things were pretty fortified. And Christensen, yes, did go out of the game, but I think Christensen could work in this system with Hansi Flick. I don't think he's as dynamic as you'd want from one of your pivots. I think I'd rather prefer Christensen as a center back here in this 4-2-3-1 system, and even that 4-4-2 defending system. I'd rather have Christensen as a center back, and I think Hansi Flick would too. But because of the preseason and all the rotations, Christensen had to play in defensive midfield. Just tells, again, he's versatile, and it's good to have some versatility in the squad. Pau Victor, also, I made a YouTube video about him. I mean, his stock is so far up that just watch the YouTube video. That's all you need to know. One of my 4 players as well, Marc, Casado, Pau Victor, with those two, it's way up. There you go. I'm doing the spot, but there you go. Gundogan, same thing. I mean, he didn't get hurt, so I guess stock is up. Great. Just medium. Didn't really have to see much of him, which is just fine. We know what he's capable of. Rafinha, stock is up for him because, as I said, I would hope that he was going to take, as I already said in this stream, like a fish to water. And I thought he did. I thought he took really well in the limited time we saw. Yes, he's a natural right winger, but I think he's going to get a lot of time with Nico Williams not to arrive. And who knows if Dani Olmo really is a starter as a left winger. It still could be Rafinha. And Dani Olmo could either have to fight for that 10 spot, or he could be a rotation piece on the right, or he could substitute him for Lewandowski, or he could come off the bench, or whatever it's going to be. Rafinha doesn't necessarily have to automatically lose his starting spot to Dani Olmo the minute he arrives. Rafinha came for, I think, the exact same number, right? 55 million plus some incentives. With Dani Olmo, I think his signing bonus is a bit more. But yeah, Rafinha, the way he presses, the way he moves into the half spaces, the way he runs, and he does have a decent first touch. You don't really trust him in dribbling situations, but the wingers aren't necessarily asked to do too much of that in Hansi Flick's system. So again, stock up for Rafinha. Lewandowski, I mean, I guess stock up. He scored 2 goals against AC Milan, so that's great. That's all I got to say about Robert Lewandowski. And if he's pressing and working hard and helping the kids out, so good on him. Inigo Martinez, stock is medium for him. I mean, it looked fine in the preseason. Actually, I thought he was good against Real Madrid. So I don't know. It's Inigo Martinez. I'm not worried about a player in their 30s. Guy Fernandez, I'm actually going to go stock medium here. He didn't really, of all the young players, he wasn't the one that jumped off the page like I wanted him to. He didn't have that much time, but he's also still 16 years old. So I'm not sure if he's going to debut for the first team this season. I was pretty with full voice, guaranteeing it a few weeks ago when we did the La Masia tier list that I did. And when we did that, I felt like Guy Fernandez was guaranteed, definitely going to make his first team debut this season. Now it's possible, but I'm not entirely sure it's going to happen. But how about I definitely say it's going to happen someday? Guy Fernandez is very good. It's good to see a 16-year-old. Again, don't normalize the Minimal and Pedri and Gabi and Ansu Fati and the other and Pau Barsi. Stop with the 16-year-old kids. It's hard to break in the bar to any first team at 16. So Guy Fernandez, let's be patient. But still, stock medium. He wasn't so lost that I don't think that I'm worried about him in any way. Looks the part for sure. Inaki Pena, stock medium, same thing. Goalkeeper, preseason, not worried about it. Marc Bernal, 3rd player on that list of the 4 that I think the stock is way up for. Really excited about what he not only added to this team as one of the double pivots, but as I showed after the video I made about, I called it Hansi Flick's master plan, but we saw Casado and Marc Bernal as the double pivots perfectly execute what Hansi Flick wants to see from his double pivots. So that tells me that Marc Bernal very well could have not a role in the first team, but be relied on if somebody goes down. And he could be again, until De Jong and Pedri and Gavi, some combination of those guys come back, we could see Marc Bernal as the backup double pivot behind Christensen and Casado to start this season. That is very possible at this point with rotations, all that stuff. So Bernal, I'm saying it's almost 100% chance he makes his first team debut this season. I was so excited about him last year when he was playing for Barca Athletic, and he's been on my list now for a while. I don't want to give anything away from that tier list if you haven't seen it, but he was the other top tier with Guy Fernandez for me on that list. So yeah, Marc Bernal, definitely stock way up. Vitor Roque, stock is down. I think his time at the club is probably not permanently done, but he's either going to be loaned or sold in the offseason. I think he knows it. I think the club know it. The writing's on the wall. It's just a matter of, again, with his wages, I think Barcelona would be smart to try to loan him and see if somebody will pay that. But they also want the FFP relief right away. So they would love to just sell him on and not have to count that transfer against their books this season. So it's all business as to why he wouldn't be around the club or on the club's books in the future. That's frustrating. And I think he knows that. And that just stinks for a kid that came over too early. This is supposed to be his first preseason. So that's a big bummer for him. But yeah, I think stock is down. I don't think he's around. in 1 month's time. Kim Jeanette, I think stock is up just because he got called for the preseason. 17-year-old kid. Did he play great? No, but he played like a 17-year-old kid. He turns really well on the ball. And I think the game looked a bit fast for him as far as his decision-making and releasing the ball quickly as he needs to at the top level, but he'll be a regular for Barca Athletic this season. And I'll tell you what I saw from Kim Jeanette in this preseason is very much enough to be a good player in the third tier in Spanish football. So I'm excited for Kim Jeanette. So I still say stock up, even though, people weren't too impressed with him. I'm happy with where he's at in his progression. Jules Koundé, same thing as the other veterans. We're just going stock. Medium. He didn't get hurt. Great. He looked like a grown adult when he came on the field against AC Milan. Great. Mika Faye, I'm going to stock down. The fact that he played a few minutes at left back and it didn't really go great against AC Milan is not a vote of confidence for him from Hansi Flick. I don't think he's in Hansi Flick's plans, even though having said no to Porto, I think he's still in the club's plans. So I don't know what that means. Does that mean it's a loan with some kind of buy option for another team? Or I think you're going to hear a lot about Mika Faye and his future in the next week now. I wouldn't be surprised if by the next time you even hear from me that Mika Faye has 1 foot loaned wise out the door, if not permanently. Tony Fernandez, looking at my list here, number 4, right? Yeah, the 4th player whose stock is way up. He was a U18 player last year, making some appearances in the U19s. Everyone's really excited because he, like his cousin, is also just 16 years old. So anything that kid kind of could show you was really exciting. But he was good against Man City. Not just a young 16-year-old kid against Man City and you're happy for him, but he was good against Man City. And these kids have to stop normalizing 16-year-old kids being good against good teams. It's not fair. So Tony Fernandez is the 4th kid. That what this means for me, again, it's not that we're going to see him in the first team. I would even say at all. He might not make his debut this season, but Tony Fernandez also might be on the bench 1 or 2 times in a Champions League or whatever, when, let's say, Barcelona, act of good fortune, are able to wrap up a group stage early and they bring in a bunch of kids for rotation. I could see Tony Fernandez getting a spot on the bench and maybe even getting his first team debut, 2 to 3 minutes there or whatever it is. So Tony Fernandez, the last one, way up. Andres Cuenca, good for him for getting in the preseason. Left-footed, young, 17-year-old center back. So stock is even to maybe a little bit up because he was on the preseason list, which is, he beat out other center back names for that honor. Julian Araujo, stock, I have no idea. He started the first game. This is like the only one. I'm looking at the list. This is the only one I really don't even know where to put it, because if you had told me that after that first game, Man City, I would say stock is up. Then he didn't feature against Real Madrid. So I'm like, well, is it discomfort? Did he pick up a knock? Did I not read something? So I'd say stock is medium, right? And then this one, I'm like, did I also miss that again? Did he pick up a knock? Is there an issue? So if he picked up a knock, I'm going to say stock is medium, because I would have liked to see him more in the preseason. Remember, the only time we really saw him was working with Hector Fort, and it did work well against Man City, but he is a right back, and we didn't see him play at fullback at all in the preseason, which is a bit concerning. So I would have loved to see Julian Araujo playing at fullback in the preseason if he was available at all. If this is a coach's decision and he doesn't have a spot in the club moving forward, I mean, at his age, you think, is this just going to be a flip around a sale? But it also seems like they like him. So this is the only one I'm saying I have no idea where this stock is. So I'm going to have to just go medium for Julian Araujo because I've got no clue. Alejandro Balde, I'm going to go stock just a little bit down because he had a few minutes. He got, unfortunately, picked up a little knock, which, again, you're not going to rush him. So I'm not necessarily concerned about the knock, but it's not like he looked not say any better, but it didn't feel like a major jump when he came on the field at left back. So Alex Valle is playing on the right side. Balde is playing on the left side, and they are a similar age. But, again, Balde didn't feel like he had jumped everything up by being a first team player or whatever. But I think that left back spot is his to lose. So that'll be helpful for him to move on. And I think just like, does not say he's an experienced player, but now it's his 3rd year in the first team. So I'm going to have to say stock, I guess, again, across to maybe a little bit down for Balde. Pablo Torre, the stock would have been up, and he would have been the 5th player and the last player, I would say, from the preseason tour that I would have said stock up for. But I'm going to go stock medium because picking up that knock and missing against AC Milan, that might be too much for him because of all the other players that I've already mentioned at that number 10 spot. Rafinha already showed now against AC Milan that Hansi Flick might trust him there, and Gundogan and Pedri. Gabi can play there. And then you have the young players. I'm jumping to Guy Fernandez already, but there are other players to play. Oh, Fermin Lopez, of course. How am I forgetting about Fermin Lopez? So there's just too many other players, I think, in front of Pablo Torre to play in that position. But he also, against Man City, showed you that, A, he fits this system, though, if Hansi Flick wants to keep him around, and B, that he's cheap would be another reason to keep him around. And I know it said there was going to be two, but a third one for Pablo Torre is that when he's on the ball and playing with confidence, you see what he's capable of. And he has potential, I think, more in this system than he even did in that 4-3-3 that Girona were playing. So for Pablo Torre, I think I'm going to go slightly up, because now if he tries to make a move, I think he can make a move to a club where he's actually going to play and be a starter. And so who knows where the future is going to be with other players around Barcelona. And if Hansi Flick does keep him around, look like he did fit in the system. So that's a positive for him. Noah Darvic, I'd say medium. I like that Flick wanted to give him some time. He got some time, but he also showed me in limited time the good and the bad that I'm used to seeing, where for him, when you give him time on the ball, he can really deliver something special to his left foot. He's tall. He can dribble into space very quickly, but he also takes a little bit to release that ball. And it can be really frustrating to also see when he has to defend, because of the positions he might lose a ball, that he doesn't really get to where he needs to be. So I think he has some refining to do. And I think the goal for Noah Darvic this season is to be a starter for Barca Athletic, which he wasn't last season. So be a starter. Hansi Flick hopefully is back next year as another manager, and you do another preseason next summer, and then maybe you're a first team option next year for Noah Darvic. So I'm going to go medium for him. Unai Hernandez, it's actually going to be down, because Unai Hernandez, I thought, would be a member of the 25. I thought, speaking of attacking midfielders, I thought he'd be one of the ones not ahead of Pablo Torre, but one of the reasons why the club would be willing to let Pablo Torre walk, just because he has a little more transfer potential than Unai Hernandez does. But the fact that Hernandez only started that game against Real Madrid out on the wing, and it was okay. I don't know. As I said, the young players have taken to the system, but maybe not all of them have. So maybe Unai Hernandez didn't fully understand, or really didn't get all the permutations, or maybe Hansi Flick saw all he needed to see from him, and he just wants to see him down with Barca Athletic this season and excel there. And then we'll see what the future holds for Unai Hernandez, who is still very young as well. I think he's just 20 years old. Hector Fort apparently also picked up a knock, so medium on him. He already looked like he was good enough to be in the first team dynamic. And actually, I don't know, maybe a little bit down, but medium to down for Hector Fort, because he did struggle against Real Madrid, but he was, well, and then Man City. His first touch wasn't great against Man City, but his positioning was good. And he did understand, it seemed like clearly understood the system. And we know that his first touch is better than he showed. So that's why I kind of go with medium, that it seemed like he picked up what he needed to learn. And in training, it probably looks better than what we saw. And, maybe he just was having a rough go of it, or whatever it was. Almost done here. Under Astrolaga, I guess stock up, because he won the penalty shootout against Man City. So good for him on that. Alex Almedo, did we see him? I think we saw him for maybe a minute or two, but I mean, stock medium, good for him to get called up for the preseason tour. And then Diego Cochin, same thing. He's been on the bench for the first team before. And while he didn't feature here because the other three goalkeepers are in front of him on the depth chart, still, I mean, how many for a club, unless they really need him or they see you as the future, he's an 18-year-old. Yeah, he just recently turned 18. So 18-year-old getting called up to the preseason as a goalkeeper, always a good sign. Shows that the club thinks you're part of the future. So I guess stock up just for getting called for the tour. And yeah, maybe I'm a little biased for the American kids. And then Hansi Flick, last one for La Bolsa. Let's end this here. Stock up for Hansi Flick, because I think Hansi Flick had an idea, or had ideas, I should say, that he wanted to institute in the preseason. And through 3 matches against Man City, Real Madrid, and AC Milan, I think he did just that. Showed you the 4-4-2 defending, showed you he wanted to press, showed you the 4-2-3 in attack. Young kids can understand his system. And it seems like he's putting forth, even with a language barrier from German to Spanish, with Thiago Alcantara helping him out, seems like he's getting his ideas across this entire squad. And that's really what you want to see, because when other players like Lamine Yamal and Pedri and Gavi, and hopefully it all works, and you fit them into all this with Dani Olmo, the new signing that I'll talk about the next time you hear from me. I guarantee the next thing I have to say is likely going to be about Dani Olmo whenever you see me. So I think all of that taken into consideration, Hansi Flick's preseason in the United States tour was a success. So we'll see more in the Wangan pair, and that is coming up in a few days against AS Monaco. That's next Monday. And then the following Saturday, that being against Valencia on that Saturday afternoon, Saturday night in Spain for the first game of the season. So I'm going to try to do as many of these watch alongs as possible. I'm pretty much on social media, or somewhere will be releasing the schedule, or I'll say it on the podcast or the YouTube channel. So if you watch my other content, you'll likely be seeing whether or not I'm going to be doing watch alongs prior to a match happening. Again, I'm not going to be available for all of them, but the ones I am, I'll let you know. Again, I'll plug those, and you'll find the links and all that stuff. So I appreciate it. Again, it's Ola Culés at those links. And even if you go to just one of those links and sign up once, you can go to the homepage and it has all the different events there for you. So we're able to do some fun stuff over there. And that has really been a better way, I think, this season to foster kind of a community and live time with me. And I can have guests on and different things like that. So a lot of fun to be had this season. I'm really excited for it, especially, you know me, when the young kids get a chance. I'm really excited about all that stuff. So as always, until next time, Forza Barca.